The story of Carlo Vigano teaches us one thing. It teaches us that in the Roman Catholic institution, saying that the Pope is not legitimate is worse than pedophilia, pederasty, or any sort of other vileness that comes from Sodom. Because you have all of these monsters in the Roman Catholic system who have preyed on young people. They have preyed on young boys. And you have the Roman Catholic leadership that has covered up for these predators. And they don't get excommunicated. There's no excommunication for them. But if you say that the Pope is not the legitimate shepherd of the flock, then you deserve excommunication according to the army of Catholic apologists online. You have this whole Catholic Hosperist army online. They're Catholic sycophants. And they have been sitting there saying that Vigano deserves to be excommunicated. Vigano deserved the excommunication. Blah, 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 blah. But what about all of the archbishops, the cardinals, the priests, the diocesan officials who have covered up for sexual predator priests? So really, in the Roman Catholic paradigm, in the Roman Catholic institution, saying that the Pope is not legitimate is worse than not only the crimes of pedophilia, pederasty, and all of the vileness of Sodom, but it's also worse than covering up for those crimes. And so, if you have a man getting excommunicated for saying that the Pope is not being a shepherd, he's not being a legitimate shepherd, and then you have bishops, cardinals, priests, diocesan officials covering up for sexual predators, and they're not getting excommunicated. This tells us that the institution itself is rotten to the core. It's rotten, it's corrupt, and it's satanic. That's what it is. It's satanic. Because if you believe that those people should not be excommunicated, that these criminals, these thugs, these monsters should not be excommunicated, but Vigano should be excommunicated. If you believe that, then you are evil, and you are part of this entire criminal enterprise called the Vatican. It is a network of perverts, thugs, thieves. It's just a very sick place. Well, you can't say that and blah, blah, blah. And here's the thing. When I bring up this dark reality, you always have these Roman Catholics who come along and they say, well, there have been perverts in the ranks of the Orthodox priesthood. Is this really how we're going to argue? Is this the best that you can come up with? Is this really the best you can come up with? If somebody brings up the dark reality that there has been this network of actual perverts in the Roman Catholic world who have been systematically recruited into the priesthood, and here's the thing. One of the things that Vigano shed light upon is the fact that in the Roman Catholic world, members of Sodom have been purposefully sought out to be recruited into the priesthood. So when they're recruiting priests, there have been people in the Roman Catholic system who have intentionally sought out homosexuals to recruit into the priesthood. And we have seen this numerous times in the Roman Catholic world. Numerous times in the Roman Catholic world. And so in the whole system of the Roman Catholic Church, you have the perverts, you have the people covering up for them, and it's systemic. It's systematic. The whole thing is systematic. And when someone sheds light on this dark reality, your response is to what? Your response is to what? Let's talk about the evils done in the other churches? For decades, you have been telling people, not for decades, sorry, for centuries, you have been telling people that the Vatican was founded by Jesus Christ, that the whole Vatican Church was founded on Jesus Christ, and that it's the only true church, and that without the Pope, everything just goes into disarray, everything just goes into chaos. You guys have been teaching this since forever. And so someone like me who comes from outside of the Roman Catholic system hears all this and says, wow, that sounds amazing. Let me join this church, right? Because I believed all of you guys. I believed all that stuff. Without the Pope, it's like a ship without a captain. Everything just goes down. It's like an army without a general, without a Pope. Where's the unifying factor? There's no unification. Everything gets fragmented, blah, 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 blah. I believed all that stuff, right? So then I believe you guys because you guys are very trustworthy. Very trustworthy. You guys aren't like the Hosperist army who just makes up things or denies things or smoke screens things. Oh yeah, Israel. No, Israel doesn't deliberately kill kids. No, that doesn't happen, right? You guys aren't like those people, right? You guys are not pill-pulling people. So I believed you, and then I actually entered the system, and I stayed in it for about 6 years, and I saw the rottenness. I saw it for myself, and then you actually look into this, because I met a priest who was a pervert, and he was a predator. His name was Father Robert L. Kinsel. But then I met another priest, Father Christopher Phillips, who was covering up for a convicted, or really a confirmed pedophile by the name of Deacon Orr. And then I met Michael Yarbrough, who was also a sexual predator. So I started meeting all these priests, and they just so happened to all be sexual predators, or they were covering up for sexual predators, as in the case for Christopher Phillips, or in the case of Robert L. Kinsel, who was begging the authorities not to put a convicted pedophile priest by the name of Robert Herdlicka into prison. But then you think, well, these are just the bad apples, and it just so happened that I met these bad apples, right? It just so happened that I had bad luck, and I met these rotten-ass apples. I met the yeast that leaveneth up the batch, so to speak, and everything else is just hunky-dory, right? And I would meet these Catholics who would say, oh, that never happened in my church. Oh, I've never met a priest that way. Not my priest, not Father Murphy, would never do nothing like that. Absolutely not. Blah, 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 right? You meet all these, you hear all this type of discourse, all this type of talk. But then I actually started looking into the system itself, and I started reading up on the subject matter. And I read about how it wasn't just the case of a few bad apples. It wasn't the case where you had a priest who was a predator, but the diocese worked with the authorities to impose justice upon him. That wasn't the case. If that was the case, if that was truly the case, then I would still be in the Catholic system. It was the case of the entire institution covering up for this evil, covering up for thousands upon thousands of these predators. And it wasn't just in one country. It's not just in the United States. You read about it in France, America, Ireland, Mexico, Argentina, Africa. Various African countries have had numerous of these cases, many of these cases, I should say. And you think it's happening in all these countries where you have Catholic churches. It's happening in all these countries where you have seminarians and seminaries. And this is all coincidental. It's not systematic. And you have major figures involved in these evils. For example, remember Cardinal Pell? He was, number 2 after the Pope before he died? Or not, sometime before he died, he was considered the number 2 guy. And he was considered extremely famous. He was extremely famous, not considered. He was very famous. He was held in high esteem. And he was covering up for predators in Australia. He was covering them up. He was covering up for them. Now, they found him guilty of touching a young person or doing some kind of sexual molestation, but then he was put into prison, but then some high-level Vatican lawyer came up with a good argument, And I guess they said that there wasn't enough evidence, something like that. And then they released him. They found him not guilty. But the fact remains that Pell covered up for sexual predators in Australia. That we know. And this guy doesn't get excommunicated? That Pell never got excommunicated for this? But some guy who says that the Pope is not legitimate because he backs Sodom and says that we should have gay civil unions gets excommunicated? Doesn't that shock you? Doesn't that just stun you in some way? I mean, it's sickening. It's absolutely sickening. But let me give you guys some examples. This is a very informative book. It's called The Occult Renaissance Church of Rome by Michael Hoffman. I have done a good number of videos based on the information in this book. And there is a section on homosexuality in the priesthood. And if you look at all the various studies that have been done on homosexuality in the priesthood, they have shown that it's actually very high. Very interestingly, a lot of Catholics will reference the John Jay report. The John Jay report was based on a study that was initiated by, or it was, I think, authorized by the Vatican. And it was a study that was done to see really how many pedophiles are actually in the priesthood. And the John Jay report said, well, it's about 4%, blah, 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 blah. So all these Catholic apologists will come out and say, well, the John Jay report said it's about 4%, so it's not really that bad. But if you actually look at what the John Jay report said, you'll see that the John Jay report also stated that homosexuality in the Catholic priesthood is actually higher than in the general population. So homosexuality is higher than in the normal population, higher in the priesthood than in the general population, which is why you have so many stories of priests preying on teenage boys or boys in their early 20s. That's the reason why. It's basically like ancient Greek or Roman pederasty. That is the evil that has really plagued the Roman Catholic system for a long time. But I want to read to you guys some examples of priests and major officials in the Catholic world who have openly backed Sodom and, well, nothing happened to them. So here we go. Chicago Archbishop Blas Kupich, or Blaise Kupich, who, when Bishop of Spokane, Washington, permitted homosexual dances held by the Gay Students Club in Cataldo Hall on the campus of Jesuit Gonzaga University. Kupich was elevated to the rank of cardinal by Pope Francis in November 2016. Was Kupich excommunicated? Let me Google this. Maybe he has been excommunicated. I don't know. Was Kupich ever excommunicated? Was Blaise Kupich ever excommunicated? Let's see, the Wikipedia page. It says here, an American prelate of the Catholic Church, a cardinal who serves, present tense, as Archbishop of the Latin Church Archdiocese of Chicago. Well, isn't Chicago the most corrupt city in the world, or the most corrupt city in America? And here we have the Diocese of Chicago, which is also corrupt. I'm not surprised. This is why I say the Vatican is a network of perverts, predators, and thugs. Thugs. And not only that, you also have embezzlement that goes on in the Vatican system. Let's not pretend that that doesn't happen. In fact, back in 2012, Carlo Vigano exposed the fact that the Vatican was doing embezzlement. The Vatican was making contracts with certain people to do certain jobs, and then it would spend millions of dollars paying for these particular projects, but the money really wasn't going to where it was supposed to be going or where they said it was supposed to go. There was embezzlement that was going on. And Mr. Vigano exposed this embezzlement. And what happened to Vigano? Vigano was made the Vatican ambassador, or the nuncio, to the United States. That's why Vigano was made the ambassador to the U.S., because they wanted to move him, because at that time he was really the second in command within the Vatican administration. But because he had a big mouth and he was talking about this embezzlement that was going on, the Pope Benedict, transferred him. And he begged the Pope not to transfer him, but he got transferred to the position of nuncio to the U.S. So it's really a network of criminals. The worst type of criminals, we're talking about sexual criminals. Like I said, pederasts, pedophiles, sexual predators, really Sodom and Gomorrah. And you have people like Blaise Kupich, like Theodore McCarrick, and they have not been excommunicated. So within the Roman Catholic institution, pedophilia and pederasty and sexual predator behavior is considered not as bad as simply saying that the Pope is not legitimate because he's not really doing his job as a shepherd. Now, people will say, well, Ted, those are the rules, and Mr. Vigano broke those rules. Okay, fair enough. If those are the rules of the institution, then your institution is evil. Simple as that. It's not that complicated. I'm going to read on here. I have more examples. Cardinal Godfrey Daniels, who in 2013 referred to the marriage of sodomites as a positive development. Cardinal Daniels was recorded urging a 13-year-old male victim of sexual abuse at the hands of his friend and colleague, Bishop Roger Vangeluwe, not to go to the police. Were these people ever excommunicated? Was Godfrey Daniels? Let's see. What does it say here? He was Belgian Cardinal of the Roman Catholic Church, served as the Metropolitan Archbishop of Mechelen, Brussels, and the chairman of the Episcopal Conference. His resignation that he had submitted in 2008 at the age of 75 was accepted by Benedict, but he was never excommunicated. No excommunication for this Belgian pervert, this Belgian monster, who urged a 13-year-old boy not to go to the police to report that his friend, Bishop Roger Vangeluwe, had touched him, had sexually abused him, I should say. Let's look up Mr. Roger. Let's see here. Oh, I found him right here. Former prelate of the Catholic Church who was Bishop of Bruges from 1985 to 2010. That's a long time to be a bishop. He resigned after admitting that while he was a priest and a bishop, he had sexual relations over 15 years with his nephew, who was a minor. And he was laicized by Pope Francis, but was he excommunicated? Decision made known to Vangeluwe March 2024. This is very recent. 2024. Pope Francis laicized Vangeluwe as Belgium's bishops had long advocated on the recommendation of the dicastery, blah, blah, blah. The announcement made by the Apostolic Nunciature to Belgium said that the former bishop asked to be able to reside in a place of retreat without any contact with the outside world. No excommunication from Mr. Vangeluwe. Let's read some more of this stuff. Cardinal Timothy Michael Dolan. Oh, everyone knows Dolan, right? He's friends with Regis Philbin. Cardinal Timothy Michael Dolan, the Archbishop of New York, who led the 2015 St. Patrick's Day Parade as Grand Marshal, Grand Wizard, after praising as a wise one the parade organizers' decision to allow right to sodomy groups to march at the event. Has Timothy Michael Dolan been excommunicated? No excommunication for him. Archbishop Bruno Forte of the Diocese of Chieti Vasto, Italy, who drafted the homosexuality section of the midterm report of the 2014 Synod on the Family that spoke of accepting and valuing gay sexual orientation. When questioned about his declaration, Archbishop Forte stated that sexually active homosexuals have rights that should be protected, calling unions of sodomites an issue of respect and stating, quote, connected to homosexual unions, it has to be noted that there are cases in which mutual aid to the point of sacrifice constitutes a precious support in the life of the partners. Has Mr. Bruno Forte been excommunicated? No excommunication for Bruno Forte. Cardinal Angelo Sodano, the Dean of the Vatican's College of Cardinals, attempted to halt investigations into sex crimes committed by Father Marcial Maciel Degollado, the wealthy founder of the Legionnaires of Christ. Oh, yes, Mr. Maciel Degollado. He was very close to Pope John Paul II. Pope John Paul II was using Degollado as a proxy against the more Marxist clergy members in the Vatican. So there was really a Cold War that was going on within the Vatican, and Degollado was against communism. So the Vatican needed him, even though Degollado was a very sick person. He was a pederast. He was a very, very evil and vile individual. But no excommunication for Angelo Sodano, who wanted to halt investigations into the crimes of Maciel Degollado. And it says here, Cardinal Raimundo Damasceno Assis, the Archbishop of Aparecida, Brazil, and president of Brazil's National Conference of Bishops, who praised the softer and tolerant rhetoric of Francis, especially regarding homosexuality. Was Mr. Assis excommunicated? No excommunication. So, and these are high-ranking members. These aren't just your local priest down the road somewhere in Alabama. These are high-ranking officials. I mean, look at these titles. Archbishop Bruno Forte of the Diocese of Chieti Vasto, who drafted a section on homosexuality for this 2014 Synod of the Family. You have Cardinal Angelo Sodano, Dean of the Vatican's College of Cardinals, Cardinal Raimundo Damasceno Assis, Archbishop of Aparecida, Brazil, and President of Brazil's National Conference of Bishops. These are high-ranking figures in the Vatican, and look at this stuff that we're doing. So Francis says that he can judge Trump, but when it comes to priests who are members of Sodom, he can't judge them. He can't. Who am I to judge? Who am I to judge? I have to respect the person's human dignity. Now, here's another monster, Cardinal Desmond Connell. He was Archbishop of Dublin in 1988. In 2002, the Irish National Television Network, RTE, broadcast Cardinal Secrets, a report by the investigative journalist Mary Raftery exposing the Archdiocese's protection of 8 priests who had sexually abused children. An independent commission was established to investigate the Archdiocese's handling of 325 claims of child molestation. Cardinal Connell mounted a high court challenge to block the inquiry from gaining access to 5,500 files on priests and molestation allegations. He secured a temporary injunction before withdrawing his action later amid public outrage. After retiring in 2004, Connell lived in comfort provided by the church. He was never prosecuted. So this guy, and there's more here. Let's look at a little bit more of the information here. 2009, the government of Ireland mounted a commission of inquiry led by Judge Yvonne Murphy, which resulted in the 2009 Murphy Report. The Dublin Archdiocese's preoccupations in dealing with cases of child sexual abuse, at least until the mid-1990s, were the maintenance of secrecy, the avoidance of scandal, the protection of the reputation of the Church, and the preservation of its assets, the Commission found. All other considerations, including the welfare of children and justice for victims, were subordinated to these priorities. So what mattered? According to the 2009 Murphy Report, what mattered to the Dublin Archdiocese was protecting the money. So they wanted to cover up the sexual crimes so that they wouldn't have to pay the victims. That's what this was about. It was about protecting the assets. And if the assets could be protected and they could still continue on with their evil without repercussions, they would continue to do it. And Mr. Connell, instead of saying, let's fight these pedophiles, he says what? He says, no, I want to prevent the authorities from looking at the thousands of files on molestation. I don't want people to look. I want to prevent these investigators from looking at the thousands of files on priests molesting children. And this is supposed to be not a systemic problem. It's not systematic. It's not part of the institution. It's just a coincidence that this happens. It's just a few bad apples. It's a few bad apples. But then you look at all these stories, and I can go on and on. You can make an entire 8-hour documentary on this, and you still would have enough information to talk about. You would still have enough cases to talk about, more cases to discuss. It's a systemic problem in the Vatican institution, and it is a part of the system itself. It's a part of the system. The only reason why they started to do measures against it was because of the police, and it was because of money. It was to protect their assets. But if the police never went against them, if justice never went against them, if their money could be protected, then they would never have stopped. They would never have done anything about this. They would have just continued on, and this evil still goes on. It still goes on. But you have more eyes on the wolves who dress up as sheep. And the problem is you have a lot of the laity who come along and they want to protect these balls of jello who dress up as priests and who wear the attire of bishops when they're really just a bunch of gluttonous criminals and thugs. But Vigano gets excommunicated, and you have all of the sycophants who come along and say he deserved it, when they're not saying that these people need the excommunication, and they need more than that. They need more than that. They need capital punishment for this. And that's what I say. They need capital punishment. The problem is not a few bad apples. The problem is the institution itself. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.